Also at the US Congressional Subcommittee hearings this week, Dr. Anthony Fauci defended social distancing, stay-at-home orders, mask mandates for young children, and other policies that he backed in the early weeks of the pandemic, saying it was all based on the science available at the time, including his recommended vaccine policies.
The vaccine saved millions of lives, and I want to thank you for your support and engagement on that. However, despite statements to the contrary, it did not stop transmission of the virus.
That is a complicated issue because in the beginning, the first iteration of the vaccines did have an effect, not 100%, not a high effect. They did prevent infection and subsequently, obviously, transmission. However, it's important to point out something that we did not know early on that became evident as the months went by is that the durability of protection against infection and hence transmission was relatively limited.
Yeah, it definitely had a positive effect for many people, especially those that were vulnerable. But we knew from the trials that people that got vaccinated still were subject to getting COVID. So was the COVID vaccine 100% effective?
I don't believe any vaccine is 100% effective.
But a Republican House representative from the state of Georgia, Rich McCormick, himself a medical doctor, says regardless of the efficacy of the vaccines, forced and coerced vaccine mandates and government overriding doctors and their patients' personal liberties are simply not excusable.
I'm probably the only member of Congress that actually treated patients during the pandemic from the very beginning to the very end of the pandemic, during night shifts in the ER. Thousands of patients during that time. And in 2020, I was censored. My medical license was threatened because I disagreed with bureaucrats. The United States government, for the first time, stepping in and taking the place of medical professionals as the experts in healthcare. Any dissent surrounding COVID-19 treatments, mask mandates, and any public policy surrounding the pandemic was immediately labeled as anti-science. I watched as public health officials and politicians told my patients what treatment options were best for them, regardless of their comorbidities or their medical history. Despite my education and my training and my experience, my opinions were relegated to conspiracy and misinformation by so-called healthcare experts who had never treated a patient throughout the entire pandemic. The American people deserve to make medical decisions through conversations with their physicians rather than politically motivated mandates. Dr. Fauci, did you ever treat a patient for COVID during the pandemic?
I was part of a team that was at the NIH that took care. We didn't take care of many of them.
Okay, so not hands-on. Got it. Thank you.
Dr. McCormick's anger is shared by many doctors around the world who were shut down and hamstrung by health bureaucrats, something that happened widely in Australia, as doctors were banned from treating patients how they saw fit and were threatened with loss of their license to practice, even if they freely spoke out against the government orders. So what are we doing in Australia to make sure that never happens again? Nothing, it would seem. Anyway, back to the US Congress and Congressman Dr. McCormick's questioning of Anthony Fauci.
Why would the government, who's never treated a patient for COVID, you can read all the things you want, but you're not there, you're not seeing patients, you're not watching people die, intubating patients right there with that disease in your face, watching it happen, watching the development of this disease and actually learning from it. But I'm being told by bureaucrats what's right and wrong. And what's funny is everything I was censored on, I was proven to be right. Pretty crazy, isn't it? You said in an interview that you gave as part of an audiobook written by Michael Specter that you believed an institutional should make it hard for people to live their lives so they'd feel pressured to get vaccinated.
Once people feel empowered and protected legally, you are going to have schools, universities, and colleges are going to say, you want to come to this college, buddy? You're going to get vaccinated. Lady, you're going to get vaccinated. Yeah. Big corporations like Amazon and Facebook and all of those others are going to say, you want to work for us, you get vaccinated. And it's been proven that when you make it difficult for people in their lives, they lose their ideological bullshit and they get vaccinated.
Wow. Fancy calling the idea of people wanting to make their own medical choices about vaccination of basic civil liberties, ideological bullshit. I'm sorry, I know Dr. Fauci was under pressure at that period during COVID, but he could have shown some humility, do you think? But he just never seems to. This is undoubtedly a very good example of a bureaucrat a little too happy to wield their power without regard to fundamental principles of liberty. Which I'm sorry, if I was running a dating service, I'd probably try and hook him up with Karen. But anyway, I'm sorry, mate. This is not ideological bullshit, right? It's very important to the fundamentals of our liberal democracies. It's sadly the case that arrogance was something that we saw time and time again among health bureaucrats and politicians here in Australia too.
Are all objections to COVID vaccinations ideological bullshit, Dr. Fauci?
No, they're not, and
Thank
that's
you.
not what I was referring to.
Well, in reference to making it hard for people to get education, traveling, working, I'd say it very much was in context. And I take great offense to this. Miss Allison Williams testified before this committee about losing her job because she sought an exemption for ESPN's vaccine mandate, which came from recommendation from bureaucrats like yourself. She and her husband were actively working with a fertility expert, a physician, on how to get pregnant, and agreed with the premise that she was young, healthy, wanted to get pregnant, and shouldn't get the vaccination for medical purposes. But she was fired because you made it hard, just like you said in your statement, because you didn't want to make sure that the ideological bullshit got in the way of her working, of living her life, of making a medical decision with her healthcare professional. I think America should take great offense to this. That's exactly what you meant when you said making it hard for people to live.
Yeah, you can't deny that. No matter what you think about the vaccines themselves, the mandate, the forcing of people to take them was unforgivable, and we desperately need laws to prevent coerced or forced vaccinations.
You affected people's ability to work, travel, be educated, to actually flourish in American society, to self-determine, as we're all given God-given rights. Shame on you. Dr. Fauci, you've become Dr. Fear. Americans do not hate science. I don't hate science. The American people hate having their freedoms taken from them. You inspired and created fear through mass mandates, school closures, vaccine mandates that have destroyed the American people's trust in our public health institutions. This fear you created will continue to have ripple effects over generations to come. You have already seen its effects in education, in the economy, and everything else. Quite frankly, you said, if you disagree with me, you disagree with science. Dr. Fauci, I disagree with you because I disagree with fear.
That's the Republican member of the House of Representatives in the US, Rich McCormick, himself a medical doctor, giving Dr. Fauci a piece of his mind. And I hope Australian politicians and CHOs are also listening and reflecting and learning. If you like that content, there is a lot more where that came from. This is The Other Side. It's a show that comes out every week that summarises all the news of the week, and we'd love you to subscribe and support us. As an Aussie show, we really need all the support we can get because we don't have that big global audience. So we want to keep it Australian, so help us do that by subscribing, clicking on the subscribe button down there or up there. And also, please watch our content, click on the notification bell as well so they tell you when our new content comes up.